Well, today, y'all, we're going to be talking about how to support our teachers in that goal process. And, goals are so important for everyone. We all want to have professional goals. If you've ever been in a training with me, you'll hear like, you never need to stop working on yourself. Like, be like I-35, like, never stop working on yourself, babe. So, it's kind of that thing. So everybody's got goals, and we want to make sure that in our roles that we are supporting our teachers, our educators in the classroom, as well as our department educators and anyone that's really working with us in the academic area about curating their goals and then really fostering those best practices. So we're going to be talking about supporting the curation of evidence, fostering best practices for goal setting and achievement, and then how to monitor that progress to provide ongoing feedback. Our agenda today is going to be planning for successful goals and then how to support the teachers through the goal cycle, as well as reviewing those goals. Once again, any questions, just pop them in the chat and we will support you. So I'm going to turn it over to the magical and marvelous Paige Parker.
Okay, so we're going to start with, before starting the goal setting process, what are the things that you want to look at before you start working with teachers or coaching those teachers? I'm going to start by talking about some focus questions. Before you unpack the data, we're going to look at several pieces of data that you can find about goals to give you this information. But before you start looking at that, what should you be looking for? Are there low points in student scores, things that you need to address on the student side of things? Have you compared student growth to teacher performance? How can goal setting impact learning on your campus? So if you look at the little graphic there, goal setting is one of the elements that impacts professional practices and student performance. So as we're writing those goals, we want to think about student performance. What is the impact on student learning, and how are we going to get the most out of our goals to have the most impact on our students? So looking at what are we looking for in the data? What is our goal? What is our goal for the goal data? What are we trying to find out? So what are we going to look at? One thing you can look at is your focus TEKS. This is a view from Aware. You can go in and pull any assessment. This is a 2022 STAR Math test for grade 8. And all of those red standards are things where we're struggling a little bit. And there's a lot of red on this particular document. I hope that when you look, there won't be quite so much red on whatever test you choose to pull. But I would want to look at this and determine, is this amount of redness, is this specific to grade 8? Or if I look at these same standards, do the coordinating standards from other grade levels have the same kind of results? So is it a skill area that I'm looking at that's a lot of red, or is it a grade level that I'm looking at that has a lot of red? So I kind of want to evaluate, what is it that I'm looking at here, and what is the issue, so that I can talk about how to write goals that will help us impact that. Are there instructional strategies that will help us make a difference here? So finding out where my areas of weakness are, or my lowest areas on the standards and different grade levels, is going to help me have a starting point when I'm working with teachers. I also want to look at my lowest performing dimensions in t-tests. So how are my teachers doing? I've got this report that's from detailed analysis in Strive. It is, with detailed analysis, you can choose whatever view you want. So up at the top, I'm looking at observation data. My columns are showing totals. My rows, which you can't see in the settings up at the top, I'd have to click on more to see it. But over on the left-hand side, you can see that it's the dimensions in my rows. So I'm looking at each dimension. Right now, I'm looking at 9 schools. You can see that in the filter up here. Maybe that's a feeder pattern. Maybe that's all of my middle schools. I could take that filter off and look at every campus in my district. It just depends on what data I need to see. I've also narrowed this down to just the instructional domains. So by going to the domains filter and selecting just domains 2 and 3, I'm looking at dimensions 2.1 through 3.3 at those 9 campuses to see where my lowest performing areas are. And when I look on the right-hand side of this graph, I can see that my lowest performing areas are dimensions 2.1, 2.4, and 2.5, because they have the largest amount in the developing and improvement needed area. So this is a good visual that makes it jump out to me. And dimension 2.1 is the one I'm going to be the most concerned about because it has the largest number in the improvement needed section. So I can get some information about what are the TEKS that we have people struggling with versus those that are heavier on the high end, and what can I do to help with that. I can also look at student growth and teacher performance correlation. So this is a scatter plot that's generated again in analysis in Strive. In order to get this data, you have to be entering your student growth percentages in the summative documents. So it's a feature that you can turn on for your summative, where there's a box for percent that did not grow, percent that met expectations, and percent that exceeded expectations for each teacher. That information can be populated a couple of ways. It can be, there's a one-click population from our student portfolios. So if the teachers have done the ratings there, principals can click and that will populate into the summative, or teachers can add evidence into their student growth goal that principals can see and get the percentages from there, or districts can provide that information, that data to the principals, and they can use that to enter it in the summative. But if it's entered in the summative document, then it's going to show in this report. And on this report, each dot represents a teacher. I'm going to click over to live just to show you. I don't have nearly as many teachers here, but I wanted to show you that when I float over any of those dots, I will see the teacher's name that is represented by that dot. I'll see what their average is. Right now, I need to filter that down to just the instructional domains. But when I find Milo again, now that evaluation score has changed slightly. So I have their average, and I also have the student growth percentage. That's the percent that met plus exceeded. And in this case, the skew is, I hate to say in the teacher's favor, but the teacher score is 30% higher than the student growth percentage score. So I might want to look at that and find out why there's that much difference between the two. There could be valid reasons for that, but it's something I might want to question, especially if I'm looking at somebody up here where the difference is 67%. I might want to know, why is that teacher's rating so high if their student growth percentage is not as high? What's going on there? So I can look at each individual teacher to get that information. And it's also going to show me my top few down at the bottom, top highest teacher scores in relation to students. And then on the other side, the ones where the student scores are higher than the teacher's ratings. So that information is very helpful in determining where you are and what you might need to work on. Again, that information comes from having the data in the summative at the end of the year. I also want to look at areas of reinforcement and refinement. So in last year's evaluation process, we talked at the post-observation conference about things we wanted to work on, things to dig in a little bit deeper and things to refine a little bit. And I want to see how those things are going to relate to the goals. If this is something we said we want them to work on, this is an area to consider for goals. So I want to go in and look and see what are those areas on my campus. And then I might even want to drill down to specific users. And I can do that by looking at the document summary analysis report. I pulled for this one, the post-observation conference document. If your district is using that document, it has the areas of reinforcement and refinement, and it will show just like this, because it will show how many people were assigned that area, that dimension as their area of reinforcement or refinement. And that kind of gives me an idea of, based on the observation data last year, what did I think teachers need to be working on? How can we move that forward into their goal setting? And then I also want to look at any district or campus initiatives that we might have going on. Are there priorities that teachers need to be focusing on, both district or campus level, things that we want to make sure they know about and are considering with their goals? And then what conversations can I have with staff members to make sure they understand those initiatives and figure out which pieces of those initiatives can be addressed in their goals? How could their goal support those initiatives. So those conversations need to happen as well to make sure that we're covering all the things that we want teachers to be working on and working those items into the goal. Once I've looked at all of that data, I've got another set of questions. So I've unpacked it. Now what am I asking myself? Um, have I identified high and low points, both for students and for teachers? Did I find any surprises? I mean, was the data what I expected? Or was I surprised by something, and what was surprising about it? Can I draw any overall conclusions that I can take forward into the goal setting process? And then how am I going to guide the teachers to write goals that will address the conclusions that I found? So I've figured these things out from our data. How am I going to help my teachers address those issues by writing strong goals? So now that I've gone through that pre-goal work and I've identified the data, now it's time for us to start the goal setting process, or the goals process. It's not just setting, it's goal setting and then goal work throughout the whole year. So during that process, we're going to start with an orientation and a conference. The orientation can be large group or small group, just depends on how things are structured on your campus or what groups you're working with. But it's a good place for you to talk about those things that you discovered in the data dive that you just took. So what are our areas of concern? What is our area where we have the most reinforcement or refinement going on this year? What district initiatives or campus initiatives do we need to be working into our goals? And so it's a good time to communicate all of that with the teachers so that they have an understanding that of the information that you're looking at when you're trying to help them with the goals. After the orientation, teachers should have an individual conference so that you can establish that coaching relationship. You can give them guidance on their individual goal. You can make sure that they know what is expected from their goal. Some of that expectation can be part of the orientation, but some of it will be a little more specific. And so that's the orientation, and I'm sorry, the goal setting conference is a good time for you to talk about that. And also to establish that professional development plan. Professional development can be addressed through the action items of their goal, but having the conversation at the beginning about what is the goal and what PD are you going to need was going to help them when they start doing the actual goal writing. When you're coaching them on how to write good goals, using the SMART goal process is an easy way to give them guidance. And the SMART goals are supported by our goal feature that's built into Strive. You can see here in this diagram that the goal statement itself is going to be specific. It's going to be the what, why, and how of your goal, and having your teachers write good, strong goal statements will help them come up with all of the information they need, help them focus on the action items that they need to develop and that kind of thing. The M for measurable is going to show up in the success criteria, where you'll explain how, or the teacher will explain how they're going to measure the outcome. This is also going to be the results focused part. And this is also going to be a place where teachers need your guidance. They need to know what you want to see in that success criteria. How do you want it to look? Do you want it to be just a list of things that they're going to measure? Or do you want it to have percentages? Do you want it to be a narrative, what it will look like? What are you expecting from that success criteria? And then give them that information so that they can write a good success criteria for their goal. The achievable, the A, is going to be down at the bottom when they start adding those action steps. So these are going to be kind of bite-sized pieces. What are the steps along the way, the stepping stones that I will jump across to get to my final goal? And they're going to add those at the bottom. They have to add at least one before they can create the goal, but they can continue to add action items throughout the year as they think of additional things, or they do things that they didn't plan on doing, but now that's related to my goal. So I want to go back and record that as an action item that I took. And then finally, the time-bound element. There's really two places that relate to time-bound. One is the actual completion date for the goal, and that's up at the top. But then each one of the action items has a place to put a date in there. The date is optional on the action items, but I like to include that because it gives you a visual on the main screen. It's going to put a little tick mark where each one of those due dates is so that I can kind of see, oh, I'm coming up on one of my action steps. I need to make sure I go back in there and look at what I said I was going to do and get that done. So just to have the visual is helpful to me. I like to include those dates, even though it says optional, I like to include them in the goals. So the SMART goals process is a good way for you to help the teachers write those strong statements and get all the information in there that they need to have. After they are starting to write goals, maybe I've got all my goals in, we've hit our submission date for goals. I want to go in and look at the dimensions that they selected when they wrote their goals. So this one comes from our legacy analysis. It's down at the bottom of the analysis and reports page. And you can go in and say that you just want to see the dimensions related to goals. And it will tell you out of this group, what percentage selected this dimension as part of their goal. This should align with what we saw before, what we identified as areas of need, what we communicated to the teachers as areas of need, or what the teachers saw in their area of reinforcement or refinement. If I'm seeing something in here that, well, this is one I didn't expect to have a large percentage in, and I've got a lot of people doing this, do I need to check on that? Is that something that they're doing? Did they go rogue? Or is this something that they've identified a need that we haven't had a conversation about? So it's going to give you that overall picture of, we had these conversations, we're trying to align with this data. Am I actually seeing that in the dimensions that they selected when they wrote their goals? Some tips about managing goals as you go through the process. One of the things that I've got highlighted here in this graphic is the date. And I do like to encourage teachers to include the year in their goal statement. It's going to make it easier for them when they are looking at data in the archive to have that year on there. You can find it another way, but it's just really fast and easy if that's the first thing in the goal statement. So that's just a recommendation that we make. But the other thing for you is to pull this report, which is the goal detail spreadsheet, and then in column N, which is where it has the standards and tags, I can look at the dimensions that teachers selected and I can find commonalities. And then if I'm going to be coaching these teachers on their goals, I can create PLCs. Instead of meeting with each of these teachers individually, they can be a group that I can meet with together, and we can have some coaching conversations as a group. I can round up resources for them as a group, but they also have each other as a networking group that they can rely on and work with each other on the work that they're doing. So pulling that report and finding those groups will help me to help them. Additional coaching conversations are going to happen within the goal. They don't even have to be a meeting. It can just be a comment that I make. So all of the goals have a messages section. Teachers can start a message, appraisers can start a message. So I might see something in the writing of the goal that I say, well, I'm not ready to approve this. You need to have something else in your goal, and we can message back and forth a little bit until I'm ready to approve it. But those conversations can continue with things that I'm seeing. Maybe I comment about some evidence that they've added, or they ask me a question about evidence that they've added, or what kind of evidence we're looking for. Those conversations can happen back and forth. And once you click the send button on a message, it's going to do two things. One, it's going to send an email to the recipient telling them that they have a message related to the goal. And then secondly, it's going to document it. So just underneath the word messages, you'll see one that's already documented. It's going to have the starting of what the message is. If I want to click on the message itself, it'll show me the whole text because my text is truncated there, but I can see the whole thing by clicking on it. And then it's also going to show who entered the message and when. So you'll have a date and time stamp, and you'll be able to see which messages came from the teacher, which came from the appraiser. And that's going to give you great documentation, but also a great way to have those conversations without having to schedule a meeting every time. And then you're going to help teachers find sessions that will meet their needs. So that connection to professional development, that professional development plan that's part of their action steps, if they're struggling or if you just know of something that would be helpful to them, there are lots of ways that they can search. that you can search and share with them, or you can help them find the courses themselves. But you can always search by keyword by typing something in the box that has the little magnifying glass there, and it will narrow down to only sessions that include that keyword. Districts can create categories and teachers can search by category. So if you have a district or campus initiative, sometimes creating a district category for that so that teachers can easily search and find it would be helpful for your users. Those things have to be selected or tagged to the courses when the courses are built, but it's just another way that teachers can find things that are relevant. For me, the probably most important is that they can search by dimension. So they can find frameworks, look for t-tests, and then they can select the dimensions that they're working on with their goal, and it will narrow down the search to just courses that relate to those dimensions. And that's really a great way for them to find that targeted professional development instead of just randomly picking something and hoping it's going to help. And then once they've done that professional learning, you want to see evidence of it in their goal. And so they can go in and create evidence and log all of the things that they've done. If they choose a portfolio workshop entry as the evidence type, and that's only one of 4 types of evidence that they can add. But if they do choose workshop portfolio entry, then it's going to show a list of all the courses that they took. They can select the course and then write a description of what they learned and how it's related to their goals. How did they use it in the classroom? So description and reflection would be in that box below. As an appraiser, you can also add evidence. You won't be able to add their workshop portfolio entries, but you could add an anecdotal evidence. There's a text box option, or that could be something I saw when I was doing a walkthrough, and I could go and add it as a text box. Or maybe I was in the classroom and I took a picture of something that was going on or something that was posted on the wall. Appraisers can also add evidence to a teacher's goal. So that's a way for you to document and for them to document the work that they're doing. And then there are some documents that might help you with coaching teachers with their goals, walking them through that process. We have 3 that are in the community right now. They're all 3 reflection documents. One of them is the beginning of the year self-assessment, where they reflect on each of the domains, and hopefully that will get them thinking about what their goal should be and pulling all that information together. There is a middle of the year checkup where they reflect on where they are at that point, and they can add in some evidence of why they think they're at that point. And then there's an end of the year goal reflection document where the teachers can go in, pull their goal statements into the document so they don't have to retype all of that, and then answer some questions reflecting on the goal, how it impacted students, what professional development did for them, or how was it related to their goal. So they just have a few questions in there to answer as part of their reflection. Those are already in our community. You can go out to the Eduphoria community. All 3 of those that are listed there are in the reflections folder. And but you can also create other documents if you need them to have them be part of the Strive appraisal process, just to have those documents to guide you through. All right. Do we have any questions in the chat that I need to address before we jump over?
None at this time I'm seeing, but just a quick reminder, if you want to put some questions in the chat or thoughts, just put it down there in the chat and we will get those answered for you.
All right. Thank you. Well, then I'm going to turn it over to Shanna to bring it all home.
I like this part of the job. You do all the hard work. That was excellent. I love that walkthrough of that whole process and a lot of good information. And I do want to, before we jump into this section, I want to like tag on to that last slide that you just talked about with the reflection documents. And that is a huge, huge piece of this process. And I love that we already have, like she mentioned, we already have some documents in there that you can import and use from the community. But also keep in mind that like you can edit those and you can add additional questions if you want to. before, you get started. And you can also create your own from scratch. I think the biggest part of it is making sure in any of these documents that you're asking the right questions and you're getting the data that you need out of it. So anyway, I just wanted to call that out. Okay, so now, I mean, that's a lot of information. And so we need to like review those goals and the PD data at the end of the year. And this can also be done along the way. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at what your teachers, again, look at some of the data, some of the reports, figure out if you actually hit your targets on helping support those goals. So how did you do providing that professional learning? So making sure you've captured everything that the teachers have said they want to learn. Did you provide enough PD for that? Did teachers attend it? Did they attend other PD that you offered that wasn't necessarily connected to the goals? So just kind of being curious when you look at the report here. This is a legacy analysis, so you can actually look at the goal data and PD data right there and kind of in one view. So this is really a great view, a great way to kind of check, did we give the support that we needed to? And you can kind of take stock of maybe how you could do things differently, or if there's certain areas that you need to improve on. So a very helpful report. And the next thing is making sure, again, as we talked about, making sure that the reflection is a part of the process. So including the reflection in there, making sure that you have whatever your process is, and you can always review this. Do you have teachers fill this out before they come to the conference? Do you fill this out together? But you want to make sure you're reviewing this information at the end of the year with teachers, and you're having those conversations, again, getting that information that you want out of this, out of these documents. And if there's any part of the reflection, not only about personal, how teachers are reflecting on their personal goals, but is there any reflection that you can add in here, maybe that teachers could share on the goal process in general, that might give you a little insight in reviewing your process? So, and that's really important. So on the next slide, we kind of go through that. Look at that cycle, look at your process that you put together. And as with any process, you need to make sure that you set aside time to review not only each step of the process, but also as a whole, like how is this working? So, and so put in place, some ways that you can measure that. So how does that, how does that take form? It could be a part of the reflection, as I just mentioned. Maybe you have a quick feedback, get feedback from stakeholders, maybe other appraisers, maybe the coaches, and also teachers that are setting goals, looking for any obvious patterns or anything that stands out. Like, again, reviewing that professional learning. Did you, include enough professional learning, or do you feel like you need to add more support there? So I think any of the ways that you could look at your entire process and get input about what can we do better, what can we change, is really extremely important for this, because again, you want it to be something that's not a burden. You want it to be something that's easy and it flows and it gives you the information that you want. And again, it's not that extra thing, and it really feels like it's a good process and it feels good. So, and that kind of leads me to the last slide here. And I titled this data-driven culture. And we've talked a lot about data and the different data point. Well, Paige actually talked a lot about the different data points that you can find in Strive, the different places that you can capture and analyze the data. And I think that is huge, and it'll be very helpful when you have the conversations with the teachers. But I also don't want you to lose sight of the most important piece of the process, and that is those documents that Paige mentioned, the self-assessment, the reflections. It's important. We want teachers to take ownership of their learning and identifying the areas. So it's helpful for you to find that data of areas you feel teachers might need to improve, and bringing that to that conference that you have, and going through those things and talking through that. I think that's huge. And I also think even having maybe campus goals or things are big, but really having a goal that a teacher is able to identify collectively with you in that process. So you're looking at that data together and you're saying, okay, where do you see, you know, struggles, and what do you think you might want to work on? And really having that be a conversational type thing, I think is really important, because we want teachers to buy in. Everybody wants to be in charge. If you truly have a desire to improve in certain areas, you're going to put your effort in those areas. So having that teacher buy-in, having those conversations. And when we were talking about this webinar and we were planning it, I brought up the fact that we have these same exact conversations about students, right? Like, we want our students to take ownership of their learning, and we want them to you know, kind of identify those areas that they need to improve, and because that helps them take ownership. So I think, as you know, as educators, we should be doing the same thing. And I think it's a very common thing. So I really like the idea of having just that culture of let's dig in together and let's figure things out. And yeah. So anyway, I think, again, having that is very important. All of this data is so helpful. So I really, I think it's important. So